you are a coder guy, you love to code,
Yeah.
you build side projects still. That's always a keyboard. Like, I need to write something. There's something cool that I can build. From transitioning to managing the team, like, what was your toughest thing? And hey, man, how did Gatsby started? The name, how you got the Gatsby, and how was the project, how it started, and how's it going on, and how you got involved in it. I want to know all.
I think my most basic advice is uh, sign in.
All it matters is why you love building it.
Exactly.
That is probably the coolest co-founder story that I have heard. And
Yeah.
the journey, I never thought and couldn't even imagine. Hey there, everyone. My name is Hitesh, and welcome to the YouTube channel. And these are, again, the another interesting kind of segments that we do up here. These are just about introducing you to the hot shots of the ecosystem of the tech industry. And I would love to bring them up, have a discussion with them, introduce you to what they are doing right now, and just have a casual conversation with them. Today, I'm kind of in a fanboy moment. I am with Dustin, and I've been a huge fan of his work. And especially when the first time I saw the Gatsby and the Dustin being the co founder of the Gatsby, I was like, I'm a big fan of Gatsby, by the way. I started building the whole application. My first startup that got acquired was totally built on Gatsby, and super happy with that. So let me introduce you to, hey, Dustin, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Excited to chat with you. My morning, your evening. But yeah, I can talk about Gatsby, Postman, all the things. But it should be a fun chat.
Oh man, thank you so much. We got initial hiccup about the links. We would just keep on wondering about where to meet. Oh man. Dustin, a quick questions. Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from a tiny little town in Iowa, about 2,000 people. So that's the middle of America for anyone who's not familiar with a lot of the states. And then now I live in San Francisco, California.
Oh, nice. I would rightly get started with my favorite project. I know you have been involved in so many of the projects and doing fantastic in the company as well. We'll come back onto that part, but right now, hey man, how did Gatsby started? The name, how you got the Gatsby, and how was the project? How it started, and how's it going on, and how you got involved in it? I want to know all about it.
Yeah. So I can talk. I'd love to talk about Gatsby. So it's kind of funny because I have a co-founder title, but it's kind of more of like an honorary thing. I don't see myself as a co-founder. So I joined as the 11th employee on the open source team. The how of how I joined Gatsby is kind of a fun story. So I think every once in a while, we as developers, use some like amazing tool technology and like it's all we can think about, and it's like we just want to keep building with that thing, use it. And for me, that was Gatsby. So, I was a consultant working for like large companies, and I was like, oh, what's this Gatsby thing? Right. And so I used it, I built my own blog, and like it's one of the most intense moments of like, passion and excitement that I can think of. And so I ended up writing a blog on building my blog um, with Gatsby, very like meta, right? And then the CEO at the time of Gatsby, Kyle Matthews, reached out and he said, "Hey, we love that blog post. Like, can we post it on the Gatsby blog?" And I'm like, "Oh, really? Like, sure, that'd be awesome." And then at that point, Gatsby wasn't much of anything beyond just like an open source technology, but it was an awesome one. And so then later, the other co-founder, Sam, reached out and said, "Hey, would you want to interview?" And I remember my response was like, "For what? Like the open source tool? Like, no, I need a job, man." And so eventually, I found out that there was Series A funding. I saw the pitch deck, like it was kind of like modern day WordPress was some of the original pitching, which is still a worthwhile and good vision. And then joined the team, grew into a lot of different leadership roles, was VP of engineering and product, and then helped eventually get the company get acquired by Netlify. And then that's when I got the honorary co-founder title. It was to kind of celebrate the impact I have in the company, but like it's kind of a fun thing I get to say, but I wasn't there co-founding the company early on, just kind of like the impact I had along the way.
That is probably the coolest co-founder story that I have heard. And
Yeah.
the journey, I never thought and couldn't even imagine that open source project can lead you to the title of co-founder and then raising the funds. Oh man, that's the coolest story of a co-founder that I've seen so far.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's you know, I'm not like it's always kind of funny because not the happiest with how everything ended at Gatsby, and like the journey, or like the destination, and we kind of lost. I think Next.js is the clear winner in the React space. Remix is interesting. I've been using Astro, right? But it's not the destination, it's the journey, and also the team that we built is amazing, and so we had this awesome cloud product that not enough people know about called Gatsby Cloud, that everyone knows the ubiquitous open source framework, but cloud's where we spent a lot of our time, and it was amazing, right? So it's kind of one of those sad stories, but it's a happy story because it's what we built, the great relationships and hard times we had along the way, and we built a business, and that is a really, really hard thing to do, on top of an open source framework.
Yeah, but you did it nicely, and it's going great. And I also got involved with the Gatsby. I did a couple of freelancing work of converting WordPress website as just WordPress, use them as a CMS, but use the front end of the Gatsby and get a crazy speed. At earlier time, it was very new when the Gatsby was new, and there was no formal implementation of it. And we did a work for a Canadian client, and oh man, that was crazy money. I enjoyed that part.
Nice.
But all thanks to you. That's where I would say my due thanks to you for helping me in building such awesome product for that Canadian client.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to a couple of good questions, fast-paced questions. What do you usually prefer, tea or coffee?
Both. So I usually pour up a coffee in the morning, and then in the afternoon, a tea. I've kind of been an iced tea guy. That's kind of a funny story. Until I was in my mid-20s, I didn't drink coffee at all. So I still have a fondness for tea and iced tea, but coffee in the morning, tea in the afternoon usually.
I'm a big time of a tea advocate, and especially the iced tea. That's been the theme of the channel for how long? I get 5-6 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a big fan of iced tea. I think there is no better drink than that.
I have a quick question. I have a quick question for you. Where in India? Because you're in India, right?
Yeah.
I tried filter coffee when I was in Bangalore last time, and so I know that's a big thing in Bangalore. I don't know if all through India or not, but I drank it in the office the first time, and I didn't know you're supposed to mix it up. So I drank this very bitter, very strong thing, and I'm I don't like filter coffee. And then the next day, Giri, a member of the Postman team, was no, try this. And I'm oh, this is much, much better. This is quite amazing.
I'm in a little upper part of the country right now,
Okay.
the northern side of it, westernish, you can say. It's like a desertish part of India.
Mm-hmm.
Very quiet, very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So another question: what kind of editor are you using these days?
VS Code. So I was a Sublime Text user for many years, and there's still some keyboard shortcuts that I miss a little. I've been using the Sublime key bindings, but it's still not quite the same. But yeah, I kind of share a link maybe. If you go to dustinshaw.com/uses, I put up my editor config. I think it was West Boss. I can't remember who, but someone on Twitter showed a way that you can simplify down VS Code to just kind of the essentials. So you can remove some of the status bar stuff, some of the panels. And so I actually configure VS Code to be even simpler than the default. And I really enjoy that. Honestly, though, I code a little bit less than I used to. It's kind of more nights and weekends and on the weekend or on side projects. So a little less than I used to, but I still have my GitHub. I still contribute projects from time to time, just a little less than I used to.
So then you are a busy guy now. So what do you do at Postman currently? Because I know you are at a big position now. A life eventually takes you there, and you get involved very less in the code, but you get involved in lots of contribution, guidelines, and vision. So what do you do currently at Postman?
Yeah, so my title's head of API client. Titles don't matter much, but what that really means is, and I like to use the words of our users and customers. So we had PostCon in May, where we kind of talked about Postman v11, talked about the more collaborative Postman product, and a user came up and he's like, "Hey, API client, that's the search bar to Google." And I'm like, "Oh yes, I'm going to steal that. That's a much better way to describe what we do." So for anyone who hasn't used Postman, the work that my team does is we build, maintain, improve the API client, which is where you send a request, see a response across all different kinds of protocols. So yes, REST, but gRPC, WebSockets, GraphQL, so on. So we've been kind of trying to say Postman's so much more than just an API client, but it's also a dang good one, and so that's the work that my team does.
How big your team is currently? How many people are you leading directly?
Yeah, so I think it might be surprising to people. It's a pretty small team that just does the API client. So including product design, engineering, because all of those functions are inside of API client, it's about 15. So we are building the team. There's actually some open roles. So if any of them seem interesting, like reach out. But yeah, so it's 15 amazing engineers, product designers, manager, or designers who build the API client, and we're building out the team in India and also in the US.
So, what's the most challenging part when you first moved? Because you are a coder guy. You love to code.
Yeah.
You build side projects still. That's always a keyboard. Like I need to write something. There's something cool that I can build. From transitioning to managing the team, like what was your toughest thing, and how did you
Yeah.
went into the role?
What a great question. So I actually think it's one of the things that builders struggle with most, because one of the things that builders I think like, and I think of myself as a builder, is you get the quick hit and the gratification of I started with nothing and now I have something, right? And that's why building and coding and problem solving is fun, because you're able to see the like work of your effort. As you move into like management and leadership, those quick fixes go away and you need to like create more systems and think long term. Like as an example, I set a strategy at the beginning of the year. That's like a year long strategy. I don't get a quick hit anymore. Like, yes, I need to see and monitor and like hopefully good things happen, right? But so I think the hardest thing about moving into like management and leadership is that you lose the quick hit gratifications that make building so fun. But when you see the work of your labors, like it's less of a day thing and more of a year thing, like that's even more gratifying. Now, sometimes if it doesn't succeed after a year, then you're like, ah, oh, crap, like I need to course correct a little bit more, and I needed to like lean in a little bit more. But so it's longer term, and it's actually kind of funny because I've had to find ways to like get that gratification. Like so I think that's where the side projects come in, is where some of the nights and weekends coding comes in. Like, it's just like if I'm not getting it day to day, like I need to find it elsewhere. And so I'm spending a little time on that.
And follow-up question on that is, I talked to a couple of people in the Postman team as well, and
Mm-hmm.
all of them say that Dustin is one of the softest spoken guy in our entire company. And I wanted to know, how can such a soft-spoken guy, uh, sometimes obviously team goes in different direction, you have to get them back and all of that. How do you do that, man? Sometimes when things goes wrong or something, like everybody say that Dustin is always calm and composed and soft-spoken, and he just is always somehow in control. So, oh man, such soft-spoken man leading the team, and the team entirely listens to you all the time. That's the feedback I got from other people in the Postman. How do you do that, man? When things goes wrong, you have to tell somebody that, you know what, this is going wrong, this is you need to fix. How do you do that with your nature, such calm and composed one?
Yeah, I think everyone has their style for how they operate, right? And I think mine has been honed over a lot of years. Actually, Gatsby helped hone my style because we had so many moments of like chaos, and like how you respond to chaos kind of dictates how quickly you recover from that chaos, right? And so, when there was early chaos, like initial response was panic, panic, like freak out, like oh my god, get mad at someone, or get mad at the situation. And what I've learned is that like it doesn't really help anyone, And so there's a great quote from like the former American president: "Speak softly and carry a big stick," which I don't carry a big stick necessarily, but like I do think that when you're composed, when you're stoic, when you're measured in your response, like that's the kind of operation that like everyone can do their best work, And I think that if leaders are scary or intimidating, like I think about great teams trust one another and then trust their leader, right? And so to me, it's all very intentional in my operating style, how I like to lead teams. And then, I kind of joke with people like, if I ever get mad or annoyed, like, then you really know, like, okay, this is a big issue, and I haven't actually gotten mad at Postman, nor do I plan to, like I like my calm, measured, stoic approach. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I think about it.
Since you have mentioned the Stoic style, I'm pretty sure you have been reading a couple of books around that, because there's a lot of good books who have interpreted the Stoic literature, because
Mm-hmm.
originally there's just one literature and everybody has iterated over in different books. I have read a couple of them. Would you like to suggest any good books for anybody to read for this kind of a
Yeah.
mindset, if you can?
Yeah. I don't know about this mindset in particular. Like, I think that your operating style is something that you got to like hone over time. And like books I found can be helpful as to seeing how do you respond to certain situations, particularly those that you're like unfamiliar with. So, I'm trying to think if there's any. I have a couple. So this might be a little bit of like a strange non-engineering-y book, but I think it could be really good. So one is called The Courage to Be Disliked, and it's a great book from. I actually don't know who wrote it, so hopefully we can share a link or something. But it's kind of like a philosophy back and forth and like a Socratic dialogue, and then it kind of shows like how to live a meaningful life, how to respond to stress and pressure, and so that's actually a book I've read recently. I don't think it shaped my style that much, but others may enjoy it because it could help shape and inform your style. And then my other top rec, which is an engineering book, I really love Scaling People. So it's written from former Stripe COO and then SVP of something at Google, a very talented, amazing woman. And she wrote her kind of playbook and operating guide for building and growing a team. And I think it has so many useful bits of information for leaders, but also for engineers on the team who want to help the company grow, which are, I think, some of the best kinds of engineers.
Awesome. Moving on to the engineering side, what you are learning these days, what you are seeking, what you are into, what you are building on weekdays these days.
Yeah. So, um, building and learning from an engineering capacity. So I would say what I try to learn most is like not engineering techniques or like tactics or like practices. Honestly, again, that's kind of my leadership style. Like I cultivate that from the people who are closest to the work, and then I kind of empower them like, hey, like, so as an example, we have a staff engineer, Udit. Udit's amazing. I'm not going to tell Udit how to go structure his code, and like, nor should I. Like, what instead I want to cultivate more of is Udit cultivating other Udits on the team, right? And so it's like, how do I inspire other leaders, and how do I create other leaders, and how do I create a culture of engineering where we care about the details and where we have high quality, right? So it's more about creating a system than like me being, oh, this is exactly the system that we should build. And I also think when you kind of drive this downwards and you encourage engineers on your team to think not just about what's good for them, but what's good for the team and what's good for the business, like those are kind of where I spend most of my time. So how I'm doing that, like I do read. One cool thing about Postman lately is there's a lot of other good leaders, like hopefully myself, but also others as well. And I've been learning a lot from them. People from like AWS and CEOs of startups have joined the Postman team, and they're building, their teams in ways that kind of inspire me and like help me think about how I should be building my team as well. So, and then how about a personal project? This is not going to be engineering, but it is on my GitHub. So I'm a new first-time dad. I have a 16-month-old son, Noah, and the project that I can't get out of my head, I've been using AI, particularly Midjourney, to make him a book. And I've been versioning it like software. So I'm probably on like 100 printed copies now. It's on like version 100, but I read it to him every other night. So that's been my fun little side project. And then because I'm an engineer and a nerd, I open sourced it. So GitHub.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice, lovely project. Coming on to the Postman side, see, I recently got really involved with the Postman and have been talking a lot to the Postman team.
Yeah.
I couldn't come to the PostCon due to my passport just got expired and I got the new
bummer.
one back. So again, I really want to see the beginners that Postman is just not a REST API client. It is such a big company, such gigantic company. I'm doing everything which is under my control to project it that it's not just a company which does the Postman client. A lot of people think that, hey, just make a web request and get a response. But it is so much of a gigantic project. There is even an academy which teaches you all things you can do with the Postman. There is a whole team which is focusing on the AI side of it. There's a whole team which is on the client side, the Postman client, and there is API hub. There is so much more. So what would you think that what can I do to improve it more, and what should I project that, hey, this is the less used feature and should be used more? Like recently I did a video about how you can write automated test in the Postman by using the Postman variables, and not it got really great response. what can I build more so that people know about this great and free and open source, not open source, but yeah, a lot of material is there openly in public product. So what can I do for that?
Yeah. So it's actually, I think I have a good perspective on this because I joined Postman around 8 months ago, and I didn't know how much more there was than just the API client. And so I think that I'm a good archetype of, hey, if I didn't know, like how could we expect a lot of users to know? So I think my most basic advice is uh, sign in. So we have this lightweight API client, and it used to be called the Scratchpad. Lots of folks use it for lots of reasons. It could be security conscious, or they just don't want the cloud product. But what I find one of the most funny things is that we get a fair few complaints about that on GitHub, which requires a sign in. And I'm like, you're signing in to a product to complain about a product having a sign in, and so again, I'm not downplaying any of those reservations, but why I say this is because if you're only using a lightweight API client, you're getting like 1/100th of the power of Postman. Like that is the simplest way to look at just an API client. And so when you sign in, I think of our core product as API client leading into collections, leading into workspaces. And so each of those products has an owner, like each of those areas gets a lot of investment. And why you would use, not just API client. So if you're working on a team, right? If you're only just using the API client, your team doesn't get any of the benefits from what you're doing. They don't see your requests. They don't see your responses. They don't see, your APIs that might be documented. And so what that leaves for you is basically friction, like, hey, how's that API work? And, I'm not really sure what's going on here. I'm getting this 404, like, can you help me out? It creates more work for you. And I think that when you use Postman in the way that it's designed, it's more of a collaborative workflow where you come to Postman, you collaborate on the very building block of development, which is APIs, and you make those APIs better with other team members. So like some specific things that I love the scripting use case. You can kind of write your APIs in like TDD style, and you can just do kind of like powerful type things with the scripting capabilities. And then collections gives you a lot of really cool affordances as well. So you can run collections, which is kind of like a way to do like, it's kind of like JMeter. If anyone's ever used JMeter before, you can kind of like hammer your API, see how it responds, see the response time, see the latency. And like each of those features are only enabled and unblocked by using the core product of API client, collections, workspaces, so on.
All right. So I would love to share this one as well.
Yeah.
I got involved with the Postman after building an open source project known as Free API.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did basically is we built a whole bunch of backend APIs like chat APIs, e-commerce APIs, social media API, and we put that as a product. Like here is your backend now, and anybody who wants to learn how API works, like refresh token, anything, we build a whole system of authentication, e-commerce, and all of that. We put it up front in the open source world that, hey, if you want to learn React, Vue, maybe Next.js, you can just consume our API, and it's all open source. It's hosted as well, and you can just get the project and start it. So these are well tested. That's where I got involved with the Postman because we wrote Swagger documentation, and it was painful. But then we realized we could have just clicked a few buttons, and collection could have done that automatically for us. Oh man, that's where we got mad on ourselves. Like, why we did this? Why we spent so much of the time when we couldn't? And that's when I contacted the Postman that, hey, we are building this, and Postman should actually project it more out, that there's so much more on that. So that's how I got involved with you and all these amazing people at Postman. What are your thoughts on the mock server on the Postman? That's a very interesting thing. I think very less used, but more people should be using it. So a few words on the mock server.
Yeah, no, so I'm glad you mentioned it. So when I mentioned the like power of Postman API client into collections, if you create a collection, right click on a collection, that's where a lot of the power and like underrated sophistication lies in Postman. So that's like you can create a mock server from there. I think that's super useful. So what I see happening is that oftentimes teams structure their organization like front end development and back end development. I don't always think that's the best way to do it, but I know a lot of people do it that way, right? And so what mock servers can do is you can start with the API. Maybe you have a schema, like you mentioned, the Open API schema or something. You can import that into Postman. And then from that schema, you can then create a mock server. which you can then construct your front end UIs based on that server, right? So what that does is it unblocks friction between front end teams and back end teams, and like neither are waiting for one for the other. And then the really nice thing is that if you can actually start this schema first, you can have the back end development team coding up the back end APIs to that schema. You can have the front end development team coding UIs to that schema, and then each are like as close to in sync as you can be. And hopefully, once the backend APIs exist, you can remove the mock server, switch to the real endpoints, and then you reduce the amount of time kind of like in waterfall development, waiting for the other team, waiting for the other stakeholder. Like no one wants to wait. Everyone just wants to build stuff. And mock servers is a great way that you can get to building.
I should really do an upcoming video on the mock servers. I found it so interesting and so amazing, and yet very less used. I worked in some of the biggest companies in India, unicorns, but again, I saw very less developers taking full advantage of it. It's not fully glued into the team. And I think that if you fully glue just the Postman inside your team, you can speed up your development at least by 2x or 3x. And I really like why did I explode Postman so late? I could have increased the productivity of the entire team if I would have knew this in advance. But whenever you know that,
Nice. Yeah, I don't have to say anything else. I agree.
Okay. A couple of last questions before we sum up this nice talk up here. A couple of questions. Have you ever been a Vim user?
That's funny because I see all the Vim memes on I can't quit Vim, and like I can definitely relate being like a young coder and like using the terminal and like how the heck did I get in here? So I'm not a regular Vim user, but like I know how to quit it. I know how to go to the end of the line. I've learned some of the shortcuts and how I've learned that. So I have a home theater PC. That's where I have my Plex server, and that's all like Ubuntu. And so I use Vim when I'm using SSH there, but I don't use Vim in regular day-to-day development.
Nice. A couple of questions because a lot of young people would be watching this whole podcast stuff. And so a couple of things. What are your thoughts about the lead code style of preparing? Because everybody knows interviews are broken, but we can't do much about it. So how much do you think have you prepared for the lead code style of questions, and what do you recommend advices for the beginners?
Yeah, the number one advice on growing as a programmer and then a developer is build things. I think that lead code is like a shortcut. And like it's not actually building anything, so if you spend a week building a side project or building something fun just for yourself, it doesn't matter if it makes money or if it's useful, like you just build it because it's the challenge of building something. That is so much more valuable in hardening and improving your skills than cranking out a week worth of like lead code, and I interviewed at Facebook like 7 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever, and they had me do the whiteboard thing, and like F whiteboarding. Whiteboarding is fun for no one. And like, this is not how good code happens, right? And so to me, any companies or teams that interview with like pure lead code type stuff are not really screening what day-to-day software development looks like. And so I'll give an example though. So I do almost every year, I do the Advent of Code, which is kind of like lead code type puzzles. I actually find them really fun. It's like a good tradition for me. But it's not as if I'm trying to get better at lead code. And I spent most of my earlier career just building stuff. And so the lead code puzzles aren't hard per se. They're kind of just fun because I have like a base level foundation of building stuff, seeing patterns, seeing these kinds of problems that make the lead code puzzles easier. So long story short, build stuff. Lead code's kind of bogus. It can be kind of fun. Do it for you if you find it fun, but I don't think it's a good way to interview people.
One final question before we sum this up. If you would have to start for your very first job interview today, you can only add one project in your resume. Give me the specs. Like if you're building e-commerce, do this, do this, do this. If you're building a video site, do this, do this. Just quick brief. Somebody who's watching this podcast can see that, hey, okay, Dustin has this favorite project. He has given me the checklist. Do this, do this, do this. What would you say there?
Yeah. So it's funny being VP of engineering, co-founder, yada, yada of Gatsby. The tech doesn't matter. Like the problems and like the depth of what you're solving for matters way more than like the tech. So I've always liked people who choose boring technologies and then what they build is amazing, And so, um, at this point, honestly, it's kind of funny. Next.js was getting boring, and then now with like the rise of server components, now it's no longer boring, and now it's kind of, I don't know, an interesting kind of like pivot point right now. So what I would say is build something that interests you, get passionate about it.
Yeah, adding on to this, a tech stack doesn't really matter. It could be PHP, it could be Java, whatever that is. Just name a few pointers, a few features, if you can give on any project, whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah. So honestly, I would say the simplest thing, start here. And it's not a resume builder or it's not a portfolio piece, but something that you can talk to intelligibly. Build your own website, and then build your own website based on whatever technologies that you want to use, that you want to learn. Because when you build for yourself, you're not beholden to has to be this perfect tech stack. You just are choosing something interesting to you, right? And so every couple of years, I rebuilt my own website, just using a new tech stack, seeing what's new, seeing what's interesting. So my current website is built with Astro. Astro is amazing. I see many, like underpinnings of what we did at Gatsby, like the Astro team is doing and improving upon. So I would say just build a personal website. And then if you want a more like portfolio piece, I've really enjoyed, there's this guy on Twitter, Ryan Florence. He's the creator of Remix. He's at Shopify now. What they have basically been doing is they do like takedowns of like modern web apps. And like the modern web app, you can call it e-commerce. You can call it like form submission, going from view X to view Y. It's actually kind of hard to build right and not jankily. And so that's why Remix exists. They're focused on more e-commerce like use cases. I'm just suggesting Remix as an example because building a real like feels nice, seamless, fluid web app can also be a good portfolio piece. But again, build it because you find it interesting, not just to get hired. And if you fall in love with the problem and like the joy of building, that's going to be way more interesting for an interview or for a discussion because you can speak intelligibly about why you built it, what was so exciting about it, and like eventually what it did and why it matters.
Oh man, awesome advice. It doesn't really matter what the tech stack is. It doesn't matter what you're building it. All it matters is why you love building it.
Exactly. And like, that's a good thing to hire for. Like if you fall in love with building, like you'll fall in love with all kinds of problems, along the multi-year career that many of you have ahead.
Awesome, man. All right. So that is it all from my side. Just wanted to ask you when you're coming back to India, man.
Might be around the end of the year, like fall. So I try to come to Bangalore twice a year. So around like 2/3 of the API client team is in Bangalore. So likely I'll be in Bangalore around the fall sometime.
Yeah, this time you come up, you ping me up, and this time we'll definitely catch you up with some iced tea this time.
Nice. All right. Already looking forward.
All right. Hope you enjoyed, folks. This was all Dustin answering some of the amazing questions. We'll definitely bring him up again. It's very difficult to get a hold of him. He's a busy guy, leading big team, but thank you so much for spending this time. Although the hiccups early days were on my side, we wasted a couple of 5 minutes, I guess, 5-6 minutes. So sorry about that. But again, the long story short, you have now some good advices. Just go ahead and act upon them. The moral of the story, build some cool stuff. That's the whole. And that's been Dustin and me. Go ahead, hit that subscribe if you haven't yet. I will be bringing up more sub podcast. And that is it from my side. Thank you so much for watching this.